Work, kid. Work, been way up for a minute now. Hold up, it's been a minute. Wow, I've been way up. I can feel it now. Tell my family I'ma get it.
Alright, people, you guys are watching and or listening to another Nomadical video for your guys' entertainment. So be sure you guys leave a like, leave a comment, share, and of course, subscribe for more epic, awesome, cool, funny content just like this one right here, right now on the Nomadical YouTube channel, because this shit is for your entertainment. That's right, people, this shit is for your entertainment. Today I wanted to talk about the vice presidents, because we talk a lot about the presidential race here on this channel, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about potential vice presidents, because I've only briefly talked about it a couple of times, I think, but I wanted to go over some information on the vice presidents that are running for election in this election season that is coming up. So let's get right into it. We'll talk about some of their policies, some of their past history, and then after we'll talk about how this all kind of ties into the election and why it's important that you guys make an informed decision. All right, people? So let's get right into it, shall we? Let's start off with who Donald Trump elected for president. So, or not for president, for vice president, I should say. Who Donald Trump elected to be his VP choice. And that person is J.D. Vance. Some background information about J.D. Vance is he pretty much started off his career as a former Marine, respectfully got to the rank of Lance Corporal in the U.S. Marine Corps, where he served as essentially a newspaper writer during the Iraq War. And then after that, he had left the U.S. military and went on to essentially start working in politics. He did some journalism, and then after that, he went to college and used his GI Bill and took out a loan, a very large loan, about $120,000 worth, that ended up going to Yale. After that, he had started up a fake fund for drug addict victims and drug abuse victims, and had used that money to essentially launch his senatorial campaign in the state of Ohio. And also within that time, he had written his book, Hillbilly Elegy, where supposedly he talks about doing the do with a couch. It's very, very strange. And it talks a lot about his grandma and his family and abusive relationships and whatnot inside of that book. It's basically an autobiography, from what I have researched on his book. But then he ended up launching his senatorial campaign and ended up winning and being a freshman Senate for a handful of years until the end of his first term, and now has been elected by Donald Trump, appointed as a running mate and vice presidential candidate. Now, here is some of the interesting things about J.D. Vance that I found pretty interesting as well. is that, well, for one, this guy actually used to be an anti-Trump guy, not because he was, like many anti-Trumpers, more moderate or just fiscally conservative, but actually because Donald Trump wasn't actually strict enough on his conservatism. Another thing that is also interesting about him is he's also a former member for the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative think tank that has created Project 2025 and is essentially an unconstitutional organization or anti-constitutional organization that very much misconstrues a lot of the historical facts behind the Constitution and tries to paint their own narrative. So something to think about there. Next, we also have Tim Walz. Kamala Harris had appointed Tim Walz to the VP slot very recently, and Tim Walz is essentially, he's just an old white guy, and he's the former governor of Minnesota. Tim Walz did a little bit of military service too in the United States National Guard for Minnesota, but he never actually saw any combat either, and there was actually some recent drama where he was saying that he was a command sergeant major, but in actuality he was only a master sergeant because he never ended up finishing the command sergeant major school, which was definitely a little controversial with military veterans and active duty and reserve and National Guard soldiers, since he was essentially doing some form of stolen valor by trying to claim that he was a rank that he never earned. Some other stuff about Tim Walz is, like, he's really not that charismatic. He is one of those politicians that pretends to be for the working class but actually doesn't know anything about the working class or have any respect for them. You know, he essentially is kind of the same character and vibe as Joe Biden, and it might go to show that Kamala Harris likes people like Joe Biden. She likes the old white guys that will just sit there and collect a paycheck and do nothing, and I think this really doesn't compliment Kamala Harris's campaign at all. But she wanted someone who wasn't going to rock the boat with her voters and was going to try to ride off of vibes and hype, I guess, fake hype momentum coming into the upcoming election, rather than on any actual policies, because Tim Walz's policies were, I don't know, a little too woke for my personal taste. Lastly, we have Nicole Shanahan. Nicole Shanahan is really interesting. She is running with RFK Jr. As a third party independent running mate. Yeah, she's running as a third party independent running mate, and her history is that she started out working as a paralegal after attending college on a softball scholarship. She worked as a paralegal and worked with AI, artificial intelligence, to examine legal documents and medical records and the sorts of whatnot. And then after that ended up working in California for a law firm that was at one point owned by George Soros. And then after that, she had dated Sergey Brin and won a lawsuit. Though she already had quite a bit of money in SoCal, with the Silicon Valley industry and working as a paralegal, it was really getting dating Sergey Brin and then divorcing him, in which Nicole Shanahan really made a whole large portion of her money. And then after that, she became a philanthropist, donated a lot of money to autism research and the Children's Health Defense, and then she actually paid for a Super Bowl ad for Mr. Kennedy, and a few weeks later was appointed by RFK Jr. to be the vice president pick and the running mate for the Kennedy Shanahan, right here, the Kennedy Shanahan campaign. So I think it shows a stark contrast in goals between all of these candidates, and it's certainly something that I believe the voters certainly should all look into, is the history of all these candidates. Go out and vote and make the best choice possible for who you think should be president of the United States. This is the Nomadic Cole signing off.